Yeah,
Maybe that was intentional.
there we go. Recording ready. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to our CBOH Career Networks. I do ask if you're comfortable and that you turn on your camera. This is a discussion. We like, just like we were sitting in a room together, you might have some tasty food and some snacks with you. So again, if you do have the availability, please do turn on your camera. That might be opposite of some of the other courses you take. And if you could at this point in time, I'd love for you to put into the chat your name, your degree, and your department, so that we know who's not necessarily, we're not keeping track of who's here, but we just love to see, where all of our members come from in the audience tonight. But again, thank you all for being here. I think people may continue to join us tonight. We've had a few, we had a large number of students registered, so sometimes students creep in a little later. But again, this is the Center for the Business of Health Career Networks. Tonight is one of our Fireside chats. This is part of one of our larger, excuse me, I'm trying to paste in here the link, but this is part of our larger career networks service, which includes learning, exploring, and of course, connecting. And tonight, we are so fortunate to have Monte Smith here, who has a very diverse career background, but at the moment, works with Trinity Partners, so he can talk to you, the group, about a number of his different career backgrounds. But then again, too, when it comes to questions, we ask that you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, you can just unmute and ask out loud. But this is a forum where if you've got some questions to ask, please do, because this is one of our alumni partners who is out in the world right now and can give you some really great information about the current state of his career, but also the greater industry arena at this point in time. So as I said, right now I'm going to put our Career Networks link in the chat so you all can go ahead and explore further. But I'm going to turn it over to Monte at the moment and let him introduce himself and let you know a little bit more about him. And then I will share with him as well in the chat all of the wonderful students that we have from really around the UNC community. So Monte, I'm turning it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks everyone for being here. It is always a delight to be in Chapel Hill, virtually or otherwise. I had the pleasure of being down on campus in the fall and really enjoy every second I can get there. Two of the best years of my life. So just by way of brief introduction, I know we'll get a lot deeper into my career pathway and why I can't seem to hold a job. But I am coming out of about 20 years on the industry side of life sciences and have been in the consulting realm for the last few years. Live in Denver, Colorado, which is not the life science mecca that you might think, but have also lived in the Indianapolis area, in the Northeast, and here with my wife and 3 kids. Been here for about 10 years, so very, very excited to be here. I was a 2002 graduate of Keenan Flagler in the full-time MBA program, and I'll get into this, but I was one of the few people who went to business school to get out of consulting at the time, and now it's come full circle, and I'm back in. So we'll dig into that, I'm sure. But that's just a little bit of background on me.
Awesome. Terrific introduction. And again, many of us would be jealous that he's in Colorado, but Monte told me that it's below 0 there. So I'm glad we're here. But I like to start off again, as I said, Monte has a diverse background, career background. So let's look at your current career as it stands. And what steps did you take to land where you are, as you said that there was already this full circle, what were the steps along the way to where you are right now?
Sure, yeah. And if you'll indulge me, I know it's supposed to be a 2-minute resume walk. I'll try not to make it a resume walk, and I'll definitely not hit the 2 minutes because I think it's worth kind of tracing the pathway a little bit. And there's a logic for this that I'll get to. But coming out of undergrad, I went into consulting. I was on the change management side of management consulting, and then went into organizational and leadership development for several years as an internal consultant. That kind of teed me up to understand that I wanted to make a change into an industry that I felt had more impact, and I would just feel like was more resonant with who I was, which was the trigger for going back to grad school. However, I failed to realize what a secret weapon it was going to be to have that diverse experience when I started to get targeted in on life sciences and specifically on the marketing side. And I'll get very much into what I do now, but having a diverse array of experiences allowed me to think more broadly about the challenges that my organizations were facing, my teams were facing. And so I really am thankful for those 6 years before my MBA doing that. So mentioned I came to school to lead consulting, figured pretty early on that pharma was going to be a good match for me, both from a values perspective, an impact perspective, and the culture of the companies really resonated with me. And that's one thing that is a kind of a common thread is when I found my way to organizations that matched my values and whose culture really resonated, that's where good things really started to happen. So for me, that was Eli Lilly, was my first landing spot. I did my internship there between the 2 years of my MBA. I had a wonderful opportunity to do a strategy project for a newly launching brand. And I remember being very nervous going into the presentation of my findings over the summer. And my manager at the time said, you know, no one in our organization has had the time to look at this as deeply as you have. So give yourself credit, you know, be an owner of what it is that you've worked on and understand you're bringing value even as an intern, even when you've only been here for 10 weeks. So had the good fortune of going back to Lilly and was in brand strategy for them, actually the same compound, was able to transition into a Lean Six Sigma role. So applying some of the consulting methodology and the analytical skill to the sales and marketing processes of a pharma company. So really interesting work, a little bit of a cultural challenge there to bring high analytics to the world of sales, where most numbers are written with crayons on the back of napkins at a bar. But a great experience. In the end, I decided that I wanted to try my hand at entrepreneurship. And I'd had a great grandfather who actually had a company, a thriving company, that always in the back of my mind, I thought, you know, I'm going to try the entrepreneurial route at some point. I want to make a difference in that way. So I actually teamed up with a guy from my study group at Carolina. He was the finance guy. I was the marketing guy. And we put together some money to go and try to acquire a small company and run it. And a fantastic experience, learned about deal making and deal flow, learned about negotiation, business case development, also learned that I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. So very helpful in that regard. And when you sit across the table from someone who has mortgaged their house to get a container ship over from China, and you really get a sense of, is that the level of investment that I want to make personally and emotionally? And I did not want to do that at the time. So was able to find my way to Novo Nordisk and had what I view as one of the best marketing challenges in pharma. You probably know that marketing is all about making a difference, pointing, you know, getting a point of difference and a position. And I went to the only therapeutic area in pharmaceuticals where there were 7 identical products on the market. And this was the pediatric growth hormone space. So the question was, how do you market a product that's just like every other product that's out there? And ostensibly, it helps kids grow. And so we had to really dig down deep and figure out, like, what are the insights that are really going to make a difference here, and how can we crack this open? Was successful at that. And in doing it, figured out that it wasn't about the product. It was about the promise that we were making and how could we make a different promise and deliver something different, not through the product, but through the services we were offering that would actually provide new value into the marketplace. So, one kind of key learning that came out of that was my first job was to fire the group that was doing patient support services for us. And when I looked at that, I figured out, no one wanted that job. And so it was a great opportunity for me to dig in and find something no one wanted to do. It was a bit of a tough slog, but it was a chance to stand out because it was a needed project. And ultimately, we ended up not firing them. And I said, we're not doing justice to the partnership. We need to figure this out and really invest. At Nova, was able to progress through the kind of different phases of marketing. I did patient marketing, I did payer marketing, did healthcare professional marketing, led the brand overall, was able to go and then lead multiple brands, had a women's health portfolio, and then was able to go out, and what brought us to Denver was a 2-year assignment 10 years ago to come to Denver and lead a region of the country from a sales perspective. And you'll see in pharma on the commercial side, that bounce back and forth between sales and marketing happens frequently, less frequently than it used to. It almost used to be mandatory, much less mandatory at this stage, but you still see a healthy appreciation for the role of the customer, getting face to face with the customer, really seeing how the business moves. So for personal reasons, decided to stay in Denver, which precluded me staying with Novo Nordisk, and was able to go through some networking to a mid-size medical device company called Terumo. And at Terumo, I led global marketing as a marketing director, then was able to lead the franchise of therapeutic systems, which was one of 5 businesses that the company had. So I had kind of the global responsibility there. Interestingly, in device, I had the medical affairs, I had market access, I had the sales side, I had the marketing side. And I also, which you don't get in pharma, I had the innovation and development side, some ops responsibility, not supply chain directly, but certainly invested in the supply chain. And so it was much more of a thoroughly general management experience. Was kind of elevated there and ultimately had a job that all of the 5 business areas reported to me. And then I had the corporate marketing and business development, medical affairs, and digital transformation. So decided at a certain point that I was no longer really doing the work that I liked to do. And everyone has to kind of figure this out for themselves. But for me, being in the boardroom and leaning on my colleagues to make funding decisions and prioritize projects, that wasn't where I really wanted to be. I really thrived at the intersection of marketing challenge, behavior change, creating new value for customers. And so I opted out of Terumo and considered actually going into the academic side and being an adjunct professor. In the end, decided that consulting would allow me to mentor, would allow me to teach and learn, and be on the cutting edge of what's going on across the life sciences industry. So the opportunity that I got kind of coming full circle at Trinity came about because I had hired Trinity in the past. And when I was thinking about consulting and is this the right opportunity and the right pathway, I talked to a bunch of my friends and colleagues who had been in consulting and really felt like the culture was going to be important to me. And also I needed to find the right fit with the strategy. They say that culture eats strategy for lunch, but I think that both are really important to be, well fed. So I ended up at Trinity. Trinity, if you don't know, is a global life sciences commercialization partner. We support our clients throughout the phases of launch and all aspects of commercialization, from business development and forecasting to marketing to sales to analytics, healthy analytics side. We have about 12 offices and 1,300 people worldwide. So that's how I got where I am.
Thank you so much. And that gave us a really nice pathway to show, the experiences that you gained, again, to what you did prior to the MBA, but also just kind of those those co-curriculars, as you say, that led to where you are now. I do want to let you know that our population out there, that, you know, our audience, we have a number of MDs, MD PhDs, PharmD students. So we are looking a lot at many people who are in professional schools. So that might give you just a little inkling into what students might want to hear. One thing that I would like to clarify, because my inkling is that students are interested in the life science consulting space. You mentioned before that you had been an internal consultant. Can you tell myself and the students what is the difference between kind of that internal consulting and being a consultant for like a life science, you know, commercialization or consulting company?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, you'll find in life sciences, internal consulting is an emerging trend. So in fact, I stood up a consulting, a kind of an internal strategy group. Sometimes you'll just see it called as internal strategy. Sometimes you'll see it as internal consulting. But essentially, the common link is there are business challenges and analyses that need to get done. And the skill set to do that may not be resident in the areas where the work needs to happen. And so within the internal role that I had was with Nations Bank, which is now Bank of America, and a guy named Hugh McCall. I don't know if any of you spend any time in the McCall building or are aware, but he was the CEO of Nations Bank and had a vision for a coast-to-coast banking franchise. And he needed help putting together the top management teams as he grew by acquisition. And so we would consult on all of those different, those different acquisitions, figuring out what the right team was going to be, how to embed them into the culture. It was a very strong culture within the organization. And that grew to how do you map the vision and the values and the behaviors that top management want to see with people who are literally tellers in a bank. And I think, you know, there have been challenges. For example, Wells Fargo, you have misaligned incentives sometimes where what the top wants to do gets translated very strangely deep within an organization. And so that was kind of the point with that. So that's the common link is business challenge. Maybe it has to get done faster than it could be done by the people who would otherwise do it. Maybe they don't quite have the skill set. Maybe you want an outside-in approach. People aren't quite as invested. All of that is common, internal and external consulting. The main difference with external consulting is that you're doing it for a variety of organizations. So the context that you're thinking about are going to be more varied because their business situations are going to be more varied. Does that help?
Absolutely. It helped me, and by faces, it looks like it helps students. Would anybody like clarification or? Great. I appreciate that because I do feel that that's of high interest when students do look into a career in consulting and or strategy. I think it's good to know the nomenclature and that there are different capacities in which you can use and flex those same skills, maybe just with, different, partners. They could be internal partners and or external partners or a mixture of both. So thank you for that. As you think about it, a lot of times, like we prepare students to go out into the world at universities and to do, certain roles. What skills, abilities, and experiences do you really use regularly on a daily basis? Or have you found like even some that are common throughout kind of the spectrum of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. And that certainly changes as your career progresses. And I was once told, actually, when I was in consulting right out of undergrad, they said, your technical skill is going to peak 3 or 4 years in, and your leadership skill is going to grow, and your technical awareness is going to drop over time because the nature of the demands in the job just shift. So clearly, earlier in my career, the functional domain of marketing was more important. But throughout, I think being able to recognize patterns and use and apply frameworks, getting people to think about challenges and situations differently is key. So, in fact, the ability to tell a story and to create context for people. I do that all the time. Why is this important? What are the key factors that we need to consider with this? How do we frame this issue? Oftentimes, it's not a matter of just jumping in and solving a problem. It's really trying to figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve, and let's get really clear about that. So that's key. So you can kind of see this all leverages into communication. Communication is absolutely critical. It is, and quite frankly, communication starts with listening, and then it progresses to what you say. But the first thing is, are you really hearing people? Are you hearing their concerns? Are you hearing underneath their concerns? Are you understanding their motivations and where they're coming from? So really pushing yourself out of your own lens and into the people that you're actually talking to. I always start every presentation thinking about, what do I want the audience to know? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do based on my knowledge of their situation and why this discussion is important. So that's a huge aspect. Of course, in the consulting side, the critical thinking, the analysis, the judgment, as well as in executive management, I'd say those are two commonalities. That's also really important. Deciding where you're investing money. Strategy, for example, is mostly about the good ideas you decide not to pursue. Because everyone can brainstorm 50 ideas and 30 of them will probably be pretty good. But then how do you figure out the 3 that you're going to double down and truly invest and pull through? That's a very important element as well. So you'll notice a lot of these are soft skills, and that's one of the reasons I went to Carolina. And I'm sure this is true in throughout the campus. I know on the business school side, those soft skills are a high point of emphasis, and I think it really makes a difference. The other thing that I would point out is I went into the pharma industry in part because I knew, as I learned more about it, I knew that nothing gets done with one function. Almost everything happens with people who are coming from a medical perspective, people who are coming from a legal perspective, people who have the regulatory lens in mind, people who are looking at the finances, people who are trying to move the product or create a promise and deliver against it. And so that diversity of thought and opinion and perspective is really, really crucial. And so that's another aspect that I feel was, I use it all the time. I don't know that it gets the credit that it necessarily deserves. We talk about diversity. I don't know whether we really peel that back and get into the depths of what diversity means beyond the observables.
Awesome. That was a fantastic answer, and very broad. So I think this is a great time to kind of bounce the opportunity out to the audience to see if there are any questions that you all may have at this moment. So I am looking, you can raise your hands, come off mute, and just start asking is totally appropriate as well. I see.
I have a question.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So consulting seems to be like I'm new to this MBA side. Consulting seems broad. It seems like a lot of MBAs want to go for consulting, but when you do consulting, how do you actually look for a market that needs consulting, for instance?
Yeah. So good question. And I think let me think about that for just a second. One of the things that Trinity is focused on is understanding that the commercial model in pharmaceuticals in particular isn't optimized. It's not working particularly well. And even if it were working really well, there's enough change going on around the industry that you're going to need to adapt and shift. So looking for discontinuities, looking for underperformance. And the reason I say that the commercial model is not working well, the numbers vary, but anywhere from 50 to 70% of product launches don't achieve their forecast, for example. As a marketer, I just say the forecasting was bad, but I don't always get people agreeing with me on that. But you know that the technologies are going to change, the regulations are going to change, the societal pressures and proclivities are going to change, the way we communicate with organizations and individuals also change. So with change comes opportunity. And the other aspect within the healthcare industry, life sciences industry, is that it's a terribly inefficient market. You have massively powerful stakeholders, all, and I try to keep the patient in mind every single day. It all exists to serve a patient, but you have powerful interests who operate around the patient with their own interests in mind. So how do you organize and how do you communicate and how do you deliver value at the intersection points between a payer and a patient and a healthcare provider and the insurance industry, a researcher and a pharmaceutical company? At all of those intersections, there's both inefficiency, there's confusion, and within all of that creates opportunity. And so I almost can't imagine a spot where there isn't an opportunity for consulting, because change happens. Hopefully that helps. I'm happy to go further if you'd like.
Yeah, because my question is, so if we have, for instance, ideas as we go along the way, where we want to improve, for instance, a product, is that one where you just approach the company and say, hey, I can improve your product, come in as a consultant?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different avenues to take around how to work as a consultant. I think that the question is there a known gap that someone has? Do they perceive a problem and from their vantage point? And if they don't perceive it, can you create awareness that perhaps there's an opportunity for improvement? What's really important is understanding their lens and their motivators. And for example, they may not necessarily, and I'm talking now about a pharma company or a device company, they may not be overwhelmingly enamored of going in and doing deep product enhancement work if they're in a phase of their life cycle where they need to go out and maximize their revenue. So they may be more interested in tweaking their relationship with healthcare professionals. They might be more interested in maximizing the commercial footprint. They may not be thinking about the ongoing development. There may be another circumstance where that's really critical to them. They have an emerging competitor that's coming out. The uptake hasn't been as good as they thought it would be. No one will pay for the product. All of these elements, I think, factor into whether you can create awareness that there's a better way. And then you have to have the wherewithal to get to what that might be.
Awesome. Brian, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Pratik.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Susan, for organizing this, and Monty for being here with us. I guess my question may be a little bit too specific, but IRA. So, what is your perspective on the impact that's really going to have for the biopharma industry today? Is it really going to shape LCM strategy? If so, what is the shape of the future over the next 5 to 10 years? If you had to point something out, because a lot of the LCM strategies used in the past, they're trying to go after them. And, where do you go from here?
Yeah, it's a story yet to be written. That's a really good question. And I don't want to assume that everyone knows what we're talking about here. But so just to probe into the acronyms, IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has important stipulations around pricing, around price increases in particular, and has the potential to be pretty disruptive for traditional business models in pharmaceuticals. LCM is lifecycle management activities. So looking at ways of extending patents, of securing and maintaining pricing flexibility. So I won't go too far down the pathway on the specifics here, but it's causing, just in the interest of staying at the level of kind of the career side of it. But if you think about it, it's causing every pharmaceutical company to think about their global footprint a little differently, about their revenue pattern across the world a little bit differently, what type of innovations they're going to bring out, and how can you sustain. Every healthcare system has its own way of controlling costs, and the pharma industry and life science industry has been able to really leverage pretty liberal approach to pricing in the U.S. And that's, I mean, when we say that the U.S. has carried the burden for the rest of the world, that's an absolute truth. We pay more because the rest of the world has pricing bounds in place. But having said that, whenever a new stipulation emerges, that's where innovation comes in. And I'll tell you that, the most forward-thinking companies are definitely on top of it, and they're evaluating their pathways. But I guess I couldn't get into the specifics of exactly what they're doing at this point.
Thank you. Great question, Pratik. Thanks.
Good one.
All right, Rui.
Hi, thank you so much, Susan, for organizing this. Monty, great to meet you. I know that you mentioned forecasting a wee bit, so I'm going to ask you from a different forecasting kind of question. Of all the burgeoning sectors in healthcare and life sciences, where do you see an increased demand in the next decade or so where MDs would need to be coming in as consultants?
I think that cell and gene therapy, while it's certainly reached commercialization, it's still very early in the life cycle. I mean, it's been 20, 30 years in development to get to this point of personalized care, personalized medicine, but it still has its limitations. It's mostly autologous, so it's a patient's own cells fed back into a patient. But having said that, the patient journey and the HCP journey, it's an entirely different paradigm. There's questions around who owns the patient's cells when they leave the patient's body. Does the patient still own them? At what point does a doctor, a physician, actually disintermediate a life sciences company? If it's mainly about manipulating cells and you control the cells at the bedside, who's to say if you that you need the pharma IP in order to treat that patient? If the big data comes along and there's enough knowledge out in the marketplace, that may be something that happens. Within other sectors or within other kind of therapeutic areas, I definitely, the rare disease has been a major focus for a number of years. I think there are also the intractable diseases, the ones that we've had a very hard time knocking down, ALS, Alzheimer's, where the sepsis, where it's just a graveyard of clinical development efforts, and finding new ways to harness big data, get smarter, that's critical. And then one other that I would point to is the role of companion diagnostics and bringing together diagnostic capability with the therapeutic capability to better target the therapeutic alternatives for patients.
Great question and great answer. That was fabulous. Thank you. All righty. I'm looking, any more questions at this moment, because we're going to stop again soon. But I would like to interject with another moderated question that I think people might find interesting. Is, again, you talked a little bit about technical skills and soft skills, but in your industry now and, throughout some of the others, what do you feel that you look for in candidates? So I know that, again, we have a lot of students from professional schools. How do they differentiate themselves or tell the narrative of the extras, not just from the clinical standpoint, but of their leadership and maybe some of the business skills and other skills that they may have?
Yep, it's a great question, and I'll talk a little bit about the consulting side. If I look at the industry side first, though, one thing that I would say, I was very surprised coming into the pharma industry, really throughout my time there, at the amount of time that was spent on leadership competencies as opposed to technical competencies. And when I mean technical marketing or technical finance, or and perhaps that's changed a little bit, but really they're looking for quality individuals that match their culture and values and the leadership behaviors that they see that have worked within their organizations. A lot of times that's about collaboration and teamwork. Sometimes that also goes to resilience or an ability to stay committed over time, integrity. So, you know, a lot of the same values that you would expect. What I haven't seen as much of is the can you do the job, which is fascinating. Can you do a great marketing plan? Can you do financial analysis? So what I suspect very much is that those of you who are coming out of your educational experience have a unique opportunity. I mean, that's part of Carpe Diem applies here. You have a lot of tailwinds that are behind you where companies essentially use professional schools as screening mechanisms. If you can get in to a school like Carolina, they know you've got the smarts. They suspect that you have the values, but they're going to test and validate that. And they take on faith a little bit more than they would if you were coming in as an experienced hire, that you actually can do the job. When I look at the consulting side of things, the consulting skill set, I think, is maybe fairly well known. Definitely communication skills. Can you tailor your communication? Can you listen? Do you provide timely and helpful information? And maybe I'll back up for just a second. I suspect this is true across the consulting industry. It's certainly true at Trinity, where a typical engagement will be one or two people like me who are called like flying cover, which is we're clearing obstacles, we're negotiating with the client. We may have one or two, and we're advising and and coaching the team. We may have one or two engagement managers or principals who are really steering the actual hands-on work. And then we have a few, 2 to 4 junior level staff, which would be associate consultants, or senior consultants, who are really doing a lot of the work. They're synthesizing the information, they're proposing analyses, they're providing the raw material for the actual end solution. So, so as it relates to leadership, if you're coming in with an MBA, or I have a PhD in neuroscience on my team who just started, she's a senior consultant. The leadership side, the span of control and span of leadership as it relates to directly managing people is low. It's 1 to 2. And within industry, that tends to be 1 to 6, 1 to 4. So it's much more about, can you collaborate on a team? That's where leadership really comes in. It's, can you collaborate? Are you pulling out the best of others? Are you surfacing diverse opinions to bring the best to bear? And of course, do you stand by your commitments? Do you deliver? All of that. Critical thinking in the consulting industry is essential. Can you do analysis? Can you do strategic synthesis? Can you interpret results? So that's critical. If I think about another kind of defining feature, it's it's managing ambiguity. We have a lot of information at our fingertips to be able to make an assessment. At the beginning, you're dealing with a blank slate. You're really trying to fill in puzzle pieces, and you're trying to create a picture and then solve the puzzle. So that's crucial. And then one other that I would point to is presence. So there's a lot of client interaction. There are some challenging interactions. A lot of it is not, it's not really head to head. Whereas change management consulting, it is. A lot of times you're telling people you need them to do something fundamentally different. Here you're largely advising on a pathway, and you're trying to get people aligned with pursuing that, but it's not quite as personal day in and day out. But being able to take the heat, being able to take tough questions, all of that is important. And then I would say for Trinity, there's a very big focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So not just is there no bad to look at. It's, are you an active advocate for bringing out the best in everyone, creating a safe environment for diverse opinions to be shared, having the humility to look at 150 global markets and realizing there are, you know, innumerable cultures at play there, and being able to have your interactions and engagements in a way that makes sense in local cultural context. So those are some of the things that I would point to. Yeah.
Terrific. Again, I think that is a fantastic, well-rounded answer. And as again, that we have many professional students here, maybe who are not in an MBA program right now. Some are dual degrees, some may be in an MBA program. But were there some things that you wish in your first educational iteration prior to the MBA, wish that you had taken advantage of at the university, some skill building, some experiences that you feel may have enhanced maybe those first 6 years of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, the number one is get out of the business school, which, you know, congratulations to you guys, and the organization as a whole has really started to focus on the, I think, competitive advantage in the global education environment. There are very few universities that have the rich cross-functional professional education that UNC does. And there is so much to take advantage of. So getting out and you know, getting into the pharmacy school and seeing what's, you know, who are they bringing to campus, looking at public health, looking at the med school. You know, I taught a class for the med students at the University of Colorado on high performing teams in entrepreneurship in medical device. So, you know, like, those opportunities are out there. I wish there were more of them when I had been at Carolina. I know there's an increasing number now. That's the number one thing that I wish that I would have done. I also, just unique to me, I didn't take advantage of international opportunities, and I wish that I would have. Just wasn't at the right time in my life to do that. And then another one that there are probably some emerging skills that maybe are more important now than they would have been when I was there. One of them is storytelling and data visualization. Data analytics is crucial. Being able to speak and tell a story with numbers in the consulting realm is really important. You know, and it's a joke, but it's true. I mean, some of your best PowerPoint experts are consultants. But the reason why they are is because they need to communicate in a compelling way. And so really digging into how you show a story that you're trying to build. You know, that may be, you know, I took an improv class when I was at Carolina, and I thought that was great. You know, a chance to build on others' contributions. I think storytelling is kind of like the improv of the 2020s. So those are three areas. And then I definitely think that the world of artificial intelligence, the world of machine learning, I'm kind of a hold on the metaverse. I think maybe in certain areas and segments, there might be some opportunity, but certainly AI, predictive learning, predictive modeling, crucial to be able to help not just reflect what is, but predict what could be and to guide decision making.
Terrific. Again, thanks. Fantastic answer. Audience questions. This is another great time to pause and see if you want to build on some of what you've heard or ask some clarifying questions. And raise your hand, come off mute.
Do you have any strong opinions about developing talent and how outsourcing?
Sorry, I crosstalk going in the background.
Yeah, Braxton, can you repeat?
So do you have any strong opinions about developing talent in-house versus outsourcing, maybe from a consultancy perspective and also maybe it's like a manufacturer, and or any trends there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mentioned that I'm in the life science mecca of Denver, which it's not. Most life science companies are operated in garages. But I've been in Indianapolis, which also is, you know, it's kind of a a one-horse town there with Eli Lilly. And the way that talent gets developed versus, is it a buy or a build? In those environments, it is very much a build. And I have to say, I feel like that was a huge advantage for me going to an organization that had to rely on building talent from within, because you weren't going to get a bunch of people who had been on the East Coast or the West Coast that wanted to move to Indianapolis to work for Eli Lilly. And so I felt like I got, much deeper, both technical and leadership training there. When I went to Novo Nordisk, what was interesting to me was I had colleagues with a 2-hour commute. Why? Because they'd worked for 7 different pharma companies and they didn't want to move. So they just said, I'm going to suck up the commute and I'm going to stay in my house. And so there is, I think it's not an all or nothing, but the bias is the talent availability is pretty robust. And so there isn't quite the same emphasis on the build. It's much more of a buy talent where it's needed. I also am seeing that very much I mentioned cell and gene therapy, hot areas. I'm seeing tenures of 6 months and someone is moving to a new company. And that is amazing to me. But the fact is the skill set is that in demand that people are poaching all over the place. Don't know whether that will continue to be the case, over the future, but certainly is at play right now. Within the consulting realm, there is some hopping around firm to firm. The firms actually try very hard to prevent that through non-competes and other things that they do. But clearly, if you have relationships in a book of business, no matter what side of the consulting house you're on, you're going to be valuable somewhere else because it very much is a relationship-driven business. So there is a lot of that kind of poaching. That said, there still is a pretty healthy amount of developing talent on the inside as well. So, for example, at Trinity, the first 2 years of an associate consultant's tenure is really rotating around to different parts of the organization, getting exposure to the breadth of work that we do and the types of clients we work with, the types of engagements, and allowing someone to narrow in. Trinity believes, as I do, that 70% of development is kind of on the job. So that's where that 1 to 2 ratio of having a couple of consultants being led by an engagement manager. There is a lot of coaching, a lot of crosstalk, a lot of teamwork that goes on within that, and therefore an accelerated pace of development, as well as quite simply just the number of projects that you are engaged on. And I mentioned those different contexts that those projects occur. It's kind of a multiplier for the learning side.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Great, terrific. Thank you, Braxton, for the question. And we have another hand. Dan, you?
Oh, hi. My name is Daniel. Thank you for your sharing. And I'm a sophomore, major in statistics and economics and minor in biology. And I'm very interested in the healthcare background. So my question is, what is the career of the healthcare consulting look like? And what should us prepare if we want to pursue this path?
Yeah, great question. And so you're an undergrad?
Yeah, sophomore, second year. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So the career trajectory would look like, and within the consulting space, this is something that was a change for me coming out of the industry side. It's a very, very different. The promotion happens relatively quickly based on results, but the eligibility for promotion from an associate consultant, which would be your entry point, to a consultant, which is largely similar types of work, just maybe a little more of the planning of the engagements, a little more of the tracking of progress as you move into the consulting realm. That can happen 1 to 1.5 years after you start with the firm. And then when you're a consultant moving to kind of a senior consultant realm, that can happen another 1.5 to 2 years. And then from there, it kind of spreads out just a little bit, but you can be an engagement manager probably with about 4 to 5 years of experience, within the firm. And once you're at that level, that's where you really are saying, okay, here's the project that we've sold. Here's the building blocks of that. Here are the work streams that have to happen. here's the work of the team to how we're going to divide it up. Here's how long that's going to take. We're going to need to track our progress, make sure we're not going over budget, make sure we're delivering the value, make sure we're following up on our commitments, that our communications with the clients are clear. So the engagement manager is a critical kind of a linchpin role. And then they constitute kind of the management team. So they start to get into more of the discussion about how's the business looking for our unit? What's our pipeline of new projects look like? Where are we looking to go? They aren't necessarily selling projects other than the follow-ons to the work they're doing. Certainly they can extend those projects, see an opportunity and bridge, but they start to get more into the developing client relationships and building that trust with the client. The step after an engagement manager would be an associate principal and principal. And that's kind of the step more into the leadership of the we call it pod or team. And so that's more, how do we do the staffing of projects? How do we make sure we're developing people appropriately? Are we building the right capabilities? How are we going to market and sharing our capabilities? They get more involved in presenting capabilities, and they actually might own client relationships across the entire firm. And then from there, managing director and partner, those are the people like me. We're primarily accountable for selling the work and for making sure that clients are satisfied, and we are looking at where the future is going and how we can position ourselves to continue to add value to our clients. So that's kind of the pathway. Sorry if it was a little long-winded, but what I would suggest in terms of steps that you can take, the first one is looking at those competencies that we were talking about earlier, the analytical skills, the communication skills, the listening skills, the synthesis and storytelling skills. All of that, I think, is almost the price of entry. It's really important to be able to demonstrate that. I think beyond that, being able to have a deeply, and this is my own personal perspective, the more deeply resonant you are with the mission of the industry and the connection points that you can make to that, the more compelling you will be as a candidate. It's not all about your technical, it's about your passion. It's about the passion that will kind of keep you going at 10 o'clock at night when you have a deliverable over a weekend for a business development project or where things aren't going so well. But you keep in mind that you're really out trying to help patients' lives, and you can communicate that passion. And this is not the consulting side, but I was shocked at how many people at Novo Nordisk, for example, have diabetes or who have relatives who have diabetes. And that's why they wanted to be at Novo Nordisk. It's a diabetes company. So that connection point is kind of the secret sauce that I think is a differentiator, assuming the rest is equal.
Again, thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
question. And terrific information. Again, this just kind of lays that base for students to start to understand in consulting, how to get in, how do you build your career from within, but then those intangibles, as you said, the passion, the soft skills, et cetera. So I feel that hopefully the students, we're at 6:54 already. I looked over and I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm going to move to the last question. So I hope students got a very well-rounded view, plus some very pointed questions were asked as well. So I thought this was a fantastic discussion. But one that we really like to ask all of our visitors is, what are some favorite books or online publications that you find valuable in your work or even within your personal growth?
Yeah. So, I had a chance to listen to one of the prior Fireside chats, and I was struck with the answer that was given to this question. And the answer was seeking out different points of view. And I could not agree more with that. And I might extend it a little bit. Be varied, be curious, be interesting, be interested, because a lot of what you're going to find is you're going to get analogies. You're going to find something in one context and apply it in another. That's a lot about the consulting skill set, is that kind of intellectual flexibility to take something that resonates. It's like the chaos theory. butterfly flaps his wings and, there's a storm halfway around the world. How does that apply to business? It's people who can think flexibly like that are really valued. What I would say is kind of linked to the earlier discussion about purpose. I think Start With Why is a foundational book that helps on an individual level and a business level. It's Simon Sinek, and it's really about the purpose of organizations and about teams and why you're doing what you're doing. That's a critical one. I think that a couple of other periodicals that are more industry, Life Science Leader is one that I read. Fierce Pharma, Fierce Biotech, Fierce Anything. They're really good at the headlines and kind of staying topical, staying current. If you want to go more clinical, Endpoints News and Stat are two that I like. I really like Stat. I think that's a good one, but Endpoints News is also really good. From a podcast perspective, I listen to the Cell and Gene podcast, and Farm Exec podcast is okay, not as great. I have a personal interest in behavioral science and how and why people and organizations make decisions. So I listen to The Brainy Business is a good one there. The Hidden Brain, Behavioral Grooves are all podcasts in that realm that I really like. And then I'll give you one for anyone who's got an eye on marketing, is the Marketing Book podcast. I like that. The guy's kind of a dork, in my opinion, but he's a little self-congratulatory too. But you can kind of skip through and get the really key points of a lot of sales books, but a lot of marketing books as well. And then you can decide if you want to go and actually buy the book. So those are big ones. And I also listen to the CMO podcast. I happen to believe that marketing in pharma is still behind marketing at the world at large for regulatory reasons and others. And so I try to stay out of the pharma industry as much as possible to bring insights in from other areas. So those are on my list.
Oh, and a fabulous list that is. And I'm a Shankar Vedanta fan myself, and I love Hidden Brain and some of those. Again, I think exactly as you stated that there's so much transferability. And I think that's really especially important for our students in professional schools, where you have to tell the narrative of what you know and transfer those into, different parallel careers. Or I think of later in folks' careers. Monte, that's the one thing, is that the fact that you've been able to pivot and pivot well is just a testament to the fact that you can gain skills, but you have to really tell that story to move on, to a new industry. You've made some really big pivots. So we've enjoyed hearing about them. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you, audience, as well. This is a fabulous group and a very diverse group when it comes to departments and backgrounds and probably what they want to do moving forward. So again, please, I actually want to put this in again. I'm going to, hopefully everybody can see it now. This is our link to career networks. Monte and many of our other partners are on there for you to connect with. So please dig into our resources. We have many of these coming up, including panels and fireside chats. But this has been truly a joy, Monte, and a joy to have our students here as well. So we thank you from the CBOH. Please come again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. It was a great amount of fun. Really appreciate it.